There are other ways of looking at history than through which country or region won or lost a war. It's not important which country won or lost, even though that is how some historians view history. One example of when historians view history through the eyes of a winner or loser, in this case winner, is the belief that Europe is the most powerful. There are groups of people known as white supremacists who give credit to the West and Europe as the singular creative force in the development of world history. However, it's not just the West that contributed to the development of the world. A perspective like this one is called the Eurocentric narrative, and it's very dangerous. One example of how the Eurocentric narrative is dangerous exists within the story of explorer Christopher Columbus. For the few who do not know, Columbus was a European explorer tasked with sailing to India. However, he found the Americas instead and met the Native Americans. Instead of treating them with respect, in their home, mind you, he caused a lot of pain and suffering. The things that he did were terrible, and he did them because he believed in the Eurocentric narrative. According to Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish priest, he says they, meaning the Spanish explorers, forced their way into native settlements, slaughtering everyone they found there, including small children, old men, pregnant women, and even women who had just given birth. The Eurocentric narrative made Columbus think that he was superior to the Native Americans he slaughtered, and that is why he did it. This is one example of how the Eurocentric narrative can be very dangerous. Before the agricultural revolution, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, and the common stereotype for hunter-gatherers is that life was not so great as one. So one would think that after the agricultural revolution, when humans evolved from hunter-gatherers to, like us today, life became better. However, this is not necessarily true. Before the agricultural revolution, life was a lot simpler for the hunter-gatherers, but after, it became a lot more complicated. This is because the Eurocentric narrative was developed, and as we already know, this narrative is very dangerous. Because of the Eurocentric narrative, after the agricultural revolution, social classes were developed. According to author and historian Kevin Riley, the teachings of the new class of Mesopotamian priests, for instance, were that their god had created people solely to work for the king and make his life easier. This means that people who lived in ancient Mesopotamia thought their only reason to live was to work for the king. As crazy as that is on its own, it does not denounce the fact that there were also gender roles during the agricultural revolution. Margaret Ehrenberg, a historian and British anthropologist, explains that women were relegated to secondary tasks during the Neolithic period. This is the same period as after the agricultural revolution. The Old World System, or OWS as I like to call it, gave the Eurocentric narrative life, one could say. When the Old World transitioned into the New World, Europe was looked at as the most powerful. However, when historians really look into the Old World, they learn that it was not always that way. However, our thoughts were and are clouded by the Eurocentric narrative, which leads us to believe that Europe is the most powerful, even though it's not and it wasn't. It is important to look into the real facts to learn what really happened. As author and historian Linda Schaefer says, Europe was not always so powerful. She quotes, "Only after the Northwestern Europe had added to their own repertoire every one of the elements of Southernization did the world become divided into a powerful, prestigious, and rich North and an impoverished South perceived to be in need of development." Schaefer talks about how Europe got all their technology and power from the South or other places in the Old World. Thinking that Europe has always been so powerful and embracing the Eurocentric narrative in general is very dangerous. It leads people, especially white supremacists in this case, to believe in something that is completely false and cloud their judgments. The Eurocentric narrative is dangerous, so when you hear someone embracing it, make sure you counter it.